welcome to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge podcast, where we talk about leadership and successful entrepreneurs and veterans come and tell their story. I hope you enjoy the show. Follow me. Let's go. Hello, everybody. Oh, gosh. Well, I have it playing in the background, too. I love going live. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge podcast. Today, it's no different. I always have amazing people on here, but it wouldn't be where it is today without all of you. Just know that it's brought to you by Victory Leadership Coaching, and please feel free to go ahead and go on Amazon and grab one of our books. We have Warrior Leadership, The Journey from Coach to Entrepreneur, and Why Organizations Should Develop Their Leaders. It's a pocket guide. Today we have Blake Miles. I met Blake in the Catalyst program, which he'll tell us a little bit about. But what he's doing with his team over there at the Catalyst, they're really helping people transition from the military and understand the civilian business landscape. And I really appreciated it because there's even some language, even though I've been out for almost 6 years now, that I learned last year when I went through the program that I wouldn't know now. But Blake, how are you doing today?
Doing very well here. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, man. Thank you. And you know, when you sent me your bio the other day to go ahead and put this out there, I learned even more about you than I learned when I went through the Catalyst program.
I stay quiet behind the curtains unless there's something I need to chime in with.
Well, but today is kind of your time to shine. You can say as much as you want and go into as much detail as you like. If you wouldn't mind giving your version, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your background.
Sure. So Blake Miles, with the Catalyst program, I'm the coordination director. I do a little bit of the communications side of the equation at the Catalyst, but I originally joined the military back in 2002, right out of high school, and enlisted as a Special Forces recruit. So I went through the infantry basic airborne school, and then I had a slot to go to selection as long as I made it through all that, and went through selection, managed to get selected out of the Special Forces Qualification course, and went through the engineering training, and eventually made it to a team 2004. Went to Iraq in 2006 with my team, and did interesting things over there. I got put into the team intelligence sergeant role, and I learned a lot over there, and realized I enjoyed doing the intelligence work far more than I was enjoying the engineering work. Apparently, engineering work on a team is a lot more logistics and keeping track of things, which I'm not very good at, but I did a lot better on the intelligence side. So eventually got out of active duty 2007 and tried my hand in the private sector and learned that, I was not prepared as I should have been. And eventually went back into the National Guard and did some recruiting for a couple of years, and got out completely in 2011 and started going to school full time, working on a degree. And during that time, I also started doing volunteer work for the Green Beret Foundation, and I was handling their social media accounts for a number of years. And eventually that led into they asked me to take the reins on a new transition program that they were putting together to help Green Berets transition out of active duty into the private sector. That lasted a shorter time than I had anticipated or would have liked, and that's probably another story. But eventually ended that role and kind of bounced around for a while, trying out different things. But one of the best parts after that was I got into cryptocurrency. I started like programming, and realized I wanted to get back into computers and started learning how to program. And at some point along the way, I discovered a long string of characters on a Twitter account, and I wondered what in the world is that. And then I figured out what Bitcoin was, and went deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole for the next 2 weeks straight, doing nothing but reading and researching. And learning about it. So that was back in 2015. It was still very, very young back then. So started during all of that time too. I was writing for SOFREP, or Special Operations Forces Report. And some of that led into me writing more about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and how it can be used in unconventional warfare. And so a number of interesting opportunities opened up along the way through that. But eventually in 2020, I got an email about a new transition program that was being sent around to the Special Forces Association that I'm a member in here in Indiana. And when I read about it, I was like, wow, it's a lot, very similar to what I wanted to build when I was with the Green Beret Foundation. And I was really excited about it. So I put in my application, and Dan Hance, my CEO, reached out very quickly and was like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you for years. I'm like, what? That makes, all right. That's exciting that you know my name, I suppose. But anyway, so I went through the first cohort at Indiana Wesleyan University back in 21, and really enjoyed it and been with the team ever since. So at this point now, I think I've, as I mentioned, sat behind the curtain on, I think we're on our 14th cohort that I've been involved with. And I've learned a great deal from the business world, just kind of absorbing in the background. And been a really interesting ride. It's great to see so many veterans that come through. And I kind of describe it as there's so many light bulb moments that seem to go off while I'm, watching Zoom each night, that they realize, I've basically been doing consulting, project manager, some private sector role. They just had no idea of how to describe it or what it was called in the private sector. So they start realizing that I do have a wealth of experience. I just need to know how to translate it into a business language. And that's what we do.
Well, interestingly enough, isn't that what you did a TED talk on, where you were very frustrated because the civilian workforce, or at least the college you were going to at the time, they didn't really recognize the experience that you already had worked on in the military and been educated on in the military. It didn't translate to what you were already learning. And even though you probably did that arts transcript and submitted it to the school, none of this stuff even mattered. And the stuff that you did get credit for, you were re-educating yourself on things that you already learned. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So at some point along the way, while I was writing for SOFREP, I was simultaneously, working on my degree. And I remember having one specific experience of talking to the guidance counselor, sit down and figure out what the rest of my degree plan looked like. And it always seemed to get longer and longer every time I'd go in there. Like I'd have another semester or two now. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, so I went in one time, and I was, she's going through the list, and one specific occasion, I had international communications. And international communications, for those who don't know, Special Forces sergeant or a detachment, the entire role is to go into another country, learn the language, the dialect, or just go into another country and understand what the ground situation looks like, build relationships with the locals, and then either work with the government to fight against an insurgency, or work with an insurgency to fight against the government, one or the other. So all of that is international communications and building relationships with people and understanding, the differences in cultures and all of that. And, in a matter of a couple of minutes, I tried to explain this to the guidance counselor, and obviously she can't do anything. I'm like, hey, it is what it is. Your transcripts from the military are what they are, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I one of the few times I actually put some emotion into my writing, and I vented some frustration about how the entire education bureaucracy functioned, and how the military transcripts. At the time, it was arts, and they've changed it now to where it's the joint service transcripts. And there's definitely some improvements with that. But yeah, my arts transcripts, I think I got 30 credits total. And, I spent 2 years straight training of full-time training. One of the things that frustrated me was we have language school. I learned the Tagalog language in the Q course, the Philippine language. And that was 6 months, Monday through Friday, like 8:30 in the morning till 4 p.m. And I only got 3 credit hours for it. And I was like, what was, I think one of the key lines in the article I wrote was it's frustrating that basically the private sector and the education world doesn't value the blood, sweat, and tears as much as what they should, something to that effect. I can't remember the exact words, but that was a rough idea, and I was frustrated about it. But anyway, that article that I wrote, I got an email from someone that was organizing a TED Talks X. I always have to specify that because I feel weird trying to claim that I'm a big TED Talk speaker, but it was a TED Talks X out at Penn State, and he said, "Hey, we got a TED Talks we're putting together related to veteran issues and education, and we want you to be the headline speaker." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a great opportunity." And I was, when that came in, I was working with the Green Beret Foundation on that transition program. So it kind of morphed into a little bit about the college, going through college after being in special operations, but also what we were trying to build with the Green Beret Foundation. And yeah, it was a great experience. I think the only downside is it was a Friday night, and Penn State had a home game that they were playing at their main campus, and I was at the Berkeley campus, so it was kind of empty. But oh well, I had a good time, and it surprises me every time I look on YouTube. I think it's up to like 215,000 views or something crazy like that. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, it was good experience, and I think the thing that makes me happiest looking back at that is where the general veteran transition space looks like now. A lot of the units now, especially special operations units, have started to staff their own team within their units devoted to do nothing but helping guys transition out of the private sector or transition into the private sector. And that was always something that I recognize as like this needs to change, specifically because there's got to be more of a connective tissue that helps people get out into something productive and something more effective. And obviously there's a whole universe of other veteran transition organizations out there now. So it's been good to see.
There is, but and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's not necessarily within the educational institutions. I think that the civilian workforce, they don't really recognize, maybe it's the verbiage, maybe it's the type of things that we did. I'm not really sure, but just veteran experience in general, it doesn't directly translate into something that is understood by employers out in the civilian workforce. Yeah. And I'm a firm advocate that it's not just up to them, it's also up to us as veterans to be able to translate that through the interview once we actually get that opportunity. Getting there is hard. It's not just for veterans, that's for everybody. It seems like now that they have that applicant tracking system where people aren't reviewing applications anymore, it's freaking AI. And as much as I love AI, I think that's a misuse of technology, to be quite honest with you. But there's a huge gap. And I think that the more people, whether it's through a nonprofit, whether it's through getting up on stage in their local community or whatever the case may be, I think that the more people that speak about it, that are going through the struggles, and explaining those things in a way that the civilian population can understand, the more likely it is that people are going to start having those conversations outside of that to kind of build up the tolerance or or maybe start giving the civilian workforce the ability to ask the right questions to get to know these veterans a little bit better and get rid of that stigma that we're only these war fighters and we're not everything else that goes along with being a soldier.
Yeah, I think something that I've noticed since working with the Catalyst is, I have a lot of different conversations, both with veterans and also business leaders. And something that seems to resonate really effectively across the board is explaining this idea of the military speaks a specific dialect of English, and then the business world speaks another dialect of English, but there's really not a whole lot of cross-cultural communication, is kind of what we describe it in the special forces world. So once the veteran is able to speak that business dialect, they're able to open a lot more doors, but still on the other side of the equation, most business leaders don't speak that military dialect, so it's kind of lost on them, and the vast majority of their knowledge in the military is based around movies and maybe books, but those are Hollywood is generally trash across the board when it comes to military movies. So but yeah, you're right, it's the preconceived notion that we're yelling in people's faces and knuckle draggers and kicking in doors and shooting people in the face. And that's the extent of it. But there's so many other moving pieces that go along with it. And I think something that seems to like stick out with me when I have most of these conversations is, the amount of experience that someone gains, especially on a deployment or going on even a training trip. You're put in situations where you have life, limb, and eyesight on the line, millions of dollars of equipment, and you might be 22, 23 years old, and you're put in these situations and you're forced to perform and expected to perform. And if you don't, then you got problems. But most civilians don't ever get that level of experience until they get to the much higher levels of their business experience. And being put in those situations where there's very, very dire outcomes for slip ups and oversights it's hard to find many other places. So I think
True.
that once I think there's more of an understanding of that, it'll start to streamline a bit more. But how we get there, I guess, is probably another conversation.
Yeah, it could be. And I think to add to what you said, I think there's very little time for us to prepare. We're in the military and we're in these leadership positions. I think we call it baptism by fire.
Yeah. Jump in the pot, see what happens.
Yep. Throwing crap against the wall and seeing what sticks. But all of those things. But you're in a unique position now in your current position where you're able to help with some of this stuff. I'm still surprised. There are so many service members that have been separated for a few years that they're still struggling with a lot of the things that your program helps with, or the program that you work with that they help with. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your role and kind of how that maybe a value proposition of how that benefits the transitioning service member?
Yeah, for sure. So specifically, my role is focused on making sure all the puzzle pieces are in the right place for our cohorts. And what our cohorts are is we have a number of different partnerships with different schools, Indiana Wesleyan University, and we're starting a new partnership with Notre Dame and also Southern Methodist University down in Texas, a few more that we're in discussions with. And essentially we have a core curriculum of veteran transition education. I usually describe it as like an MBA crash course. And so there's a number of different topics that we cover, but what we do is we bring in veterans that have been successful in these different MBA type disciplines, and they're our instructors. And so, when I'm explaining this to people that are thinking about going through the cohort, what I usually describe it as is explain that language translation concept as being, one of the hurdles that most veterans have. And all of our instructors have been in the military. Well, about 90% of our instructors have been in the military themselves, and but they've also been very successful in the private sector in these different areas. So we bring them in specifically to teach that topic. And as they're teaching that topic, since they speak both languages, all of our candidates that are going through the course, they get that language organically built into the actual instruction. And so, part of my role is lining up the curriculum and making sure that people are in they're scheduled in the right spots and they know what's coming up, and helping the veterans if they've got issues that they're dealing with during the cohort. I'm there for that. But yeah, so the outcome for the candidates once they complete the cohort, depending on whether or not they actually enroll as a degree on the degree program with the school, and that's part of our partnerships. They get college credits through it, or they can get a certificate depending on which path they want to go down. But for example, our undergraduate program with Indiana Wesleyan University, we have a cohort coming up in March, and going through a 6-week course, Monday through Friday, 6:30 to 9:30 at night over Zoom. And they get awarded 9 credit hours towards organizational leadership degree, they get credits for an organizational leadership towards whatever degree that they want to pursue. And a big part of what we do on the back end is we build up those relationships with the schools, so they have a much clearer understanding of the types of people and the caliber of talent that we're bringing to the table. So the credit translation is a lot more effective. So we have a whole bunch of candidates that have come through the program that they get the awarded max credit hours of 90 credits, and that's a Department of Education max level that you can award for someone that's starting a new program. So a lot of times our veterans that go through the course, they get their max 90 credits, and then they get the 9 credit hours for going through the cohort, and then they're 21 credits away from having a bachelor's degree right off the bat. And so that's very intriguing to a lot of our candidates. And I enjoy it just because I never enjoyed the whole process of needing to go through a class just to go through a class, because I'm guaranteed GI Bill money for the school.
Right. Well, and when you transition from the military, you're given a bunch of resources through whatever TAP program you go to, depending on the branch of service you served in. But when you actually speak to people who have done it and become successful, and then learn a little bit about what their specialty is in the business sector, I thought it was amazing. And by the way, they deserve those nine credits that they get for that class, because I'll tell you what, working a full-time job and then 4 days a week, spending that additional time, it's grueling. I'll tell you, I was getting complaints from my wife and kids. Are you ever going to be able to hang out with us during this time? So they're earned.
There's definitely a level of intensity to it. So, but yeah, you're definitely right there.
Yep. So, just out of curiosity, is there anything else that you guys do? I know there is. I'll get more specific in a second if you don't mention it. But is there anything else that Catalyst program does for veterans who are going through that transition process?
Yeah. So a big part of what we do is the finding specific roles. So a bit like we have partnerships that we establish with different companies and organizations, and we build those relationships up based on, hey, you're looking for leadership talent that you want to bring to your team. We have the leadership talent, and they're freshly trained in the business language, so it's a good pairing. And we identify people that are looking for specific opportunities, and then we try to match them up with different organizations that we have in our pool. And a lot of opportunities have come out of our cohorts. And actually, one thing I didn't mention as part of our cohort that's kind of a critical element is our consulting projects. And so part of our business relationships we build is depending on the scenario and depending on the cohort and what the cohorts are looking like. We have a number of consulting projects that act as our keystone projects during the course. And so we sit down with some of these organizations in advance and get some real world problem sets that they're looking at trying to solve, or research questions that they're trying to answer, and put together a scope of work that's going to fit within the cohort, get some objective deliverables on the page, and sit them down with our candidates during the cohort. And they have an introduction and a question and answer session. And then the teams, or the candidates, get broken up into teams. And then about a week and a half later, the business partners come back in and receive about a 15-minute presentation from each one of the teams. And so on the businesses, they get a look at some potential hires that they're wanting to bring to the table. But they also get to keep the intellectual property that the candidates put together. And then on the flip side, the candidates get a look behind the curtain at an organization or an industry they might not have otherwise considered. So, and I think the consulting projects are probably my favorite part of the cohorts, just because they're always interesting. They're dynamic. It's a live scenario. It's a real world scenario that's being looked at, and some of the recommendations and some of the presentations that come out of that turn into real world solutions that get implemented. And that's very cool to see. And we've had a number of our candidates get hired from those opportunities, or from those interactions with the business partners. And that's also obviously very cool to see from our end.
Yeah, I enjoyed the consulting projects. It definitely takes some people outside of their comfort zone, and some people, when they get out young, and so they learn a new skill set, that whether it's presenting or collaborating and putting together information, I mean, it's just a new skill set. And so it's definitely, I enjoyed it. I was in 2 different groups during the time that I was there, and I got to make some good friends out of those groups. This is usually the point, because we have about 3 minutes left, where I ask you if what's one thing that, if you could share any piece of advice with a transitioning veteran, or just overall with the group, what would you share?
It'll probably be a cliche one, but never stop networking and building relationships with people, and find out a way that I guess this is something that I picked up working on cryptocurrencies that's helped me out a good deal, is figure out an area that you want to move into, and find things that you're passionate about, and see how you can make that Venn diagram overlap between the two, and carve out a little space for yourself that, like, this is a way that I can contribute to this space and just become a subject matter expert in those areas. And regardless if it turns into a career opportunity from doing that, it's going to put you in a place where you're pursuing more knowledge, and you're pursuing personal growth, because you're finding things that you're passionate in, that touches in areas that there aren't too many other people ideally that are playing in it. So that helped me out back in the 2016 time frame, but it seems to apply across the board with most of the veterans that I talk to. Is they always have something that they're really interested in, but it might not pay the bills, but you can find ways that you can parlay that into different opportunities down the line, especially if you're networking and talking to the right people.
Absolutely. I mean, networking, and to be honest with you, that's really awesome advice, and I haven't had anybody share that yet. But
cool. It wasn't cliche then.
It wasn't cliche, But the cool thing about that is that if you ever wanted to turn something like that into a business, it always helps to try to be as specific as you can with what you're doing and who you're serving, and then it's going to be easier for your clientele to figure out what you do and how to find you.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, well, thank you, Blake, for being a guest on the show. I think people are going to really enjoy watching this. And if you're in the audience, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, thank you. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I knew this would be a great conversation. And if in the audience, if you agree with that, please like the video wherever you see that. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. I can't get this information out nearly as far as I would if I had more people subscribing to my channel. So let's help get the reach out there and subscribe to the channel. But the most important thing is, please ask questions, make comments, put something in the comments below so that we know what you're interested in and what parts of these conversations interest you the most. Once again, Blake, I'm humbled to be able to have you on my podcast. Hopefully we can chat again soon sometime, but yeah. And everybody out there, thank you again for joining me on my journey. This was another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, JJ. Great to be here.